Hello, I'm Dr. Anita Johnston, and I would like to welcome you to Soul Stories at the Light of the Moon Cafe. Stories are powerful because they transport us to other worlds, and in doing so, give us an opportunity to think and feel differently about our own lives. In my work with women struggling with eating and weight difficulties, I have found that many ancient tales and the metaphors that are embedded within them can provide us with a deep wisdom that is freeing. Because these stories teach us how to see with our inner sight and to listen with our inner hearing to subtle truths that can bring us a level of freedom from food and fat and dieting that we long for. These truths often escape us when we're caught up in the busyness of our everyday lives. Stories can slow us down so we can see and hear important information that lies buried deep within. There are many ancient tales from cultures from around the world that are healing stories for our modern times. Here's one of them from the Kikuyu tribe in Kenya. There was once this man who had black and white cattle, and he loved his cattle so much that he treated them like his own children. And every morning he would go out to milk his black and white cattle, and they would give him white frothy milk. Well, one morning he went out to milk his black and white cattle, and there was no milk. He thought, well, that's strange. But the next morning when he went out to milk his black and white cattle again, still no milk. So he moved his cattle to a place where the grass was greener, thinking, well, this would solve the problem. But the third morning, when he went out to milk his black and white cattle, still no milk. So he said to himself, something is really wrong here, and I'm going to stay up all night until I can see what it is. And that's what he did. And in the wee hours of the morning, when it was still dark, he saw the most amazing sight. The heavens opened, and down from the heavens came this huge rope. And climbing down the rope were the most amazing women he'd ever seen. And they were carrying calabashes. And they took the calabashes over to his black and white cattle, and they milked the white frothy milk. Well, the man didn't care about the milk. These women were the most amazing women he'd ever seen. So he ran towards them and he grabbed one. And milk and calabashes went flying all over the place as the women scurried up the rope into the heaven. But he held on tight to the one that he caught. And the tighter he held, the more she fought. And the more she fought, the tighter he held. Until he said, "Woman, I want to marry you." She stopped fighting. She said, "Well, all right, I'll agree to marry you under one condition." "Well, what's that?" he said. "I have this basket that is so exquisitely woven that the lid fits perfectly on the bottom. I'll agree to marry you if you agree not to open the basket until I say so." "Is that it?" he said. And so they were married. And she was a very good wife. And she loved his black and white cattle and treated them like they were her own children. Well, one morning, she was out milking the black and white cattle, and he was sitting around the house, and his eyes went up to the top shelf where the basket was. And he said to himself, we've been married a long time now, and all of what is mine is hers. Surely what is hers is mine. It probably won't do any harm to take a peek in that basket. So he got up, and he took the basket down from the shelf, and he put it on his lap. And very carefully, he lifted the lid that fit perfectly on the bottom, and he looked inside. He said, "I can't believe she's made such a big deal out of this. There's nothing here." And he put the lid back on the basket, put the basket back up on the shelf. So when his wife came home, she said, "So, husband, what have you been doing?" And he said, "I looked in the basket." "Oh," she said, "you looked in the basket?" "Yeah, I can't believe you made such a big deal out of this." "You looked in the basket. And what did you see?" "Nothing. There was nothing there." "You looked in the basket and you saw nothing. If only you would have waited. I would have shown you how to see what was in the basket. Now I must take my basket and leave." She left him. And the old Kikuyu storyteller says, mankind still thinks those things that cannot be seen are nothing, those things of the spirit. So I tell you this story because for many people who struggle with food and their weight, they focus on those things that can be seen, the food, the fat, the number on the scale. And this is often the case for those who loved them and are trying to help them, and unfortunately sometimes even some professionals. And what happens as a result is those things of the spirit, those invisible things, never get addressed. And what are those things? Well, they're emotions and their intuitions and their instincts. And so what happens is when you're struggling with eating and weight issues, you enter the world of paradox. Because yes, it is about food and weight, and it's also not about food and weight. It's also about these things of the spirit that move us deeply, that move us profoundly, that move us fiercely. Those strong emotions that we don't quite know what to do with, especially if they're overwhelming or uncomfortable or painful or frightening. And we certainly hardly know what to do with our intuitions when they come upon us. That can be very disconcerting. And we live in a culture that teaches us not even to pay attention to our instincts, so that we hardly know about eating when we're hungry and just stopping when we're full, or moving our bodies when they want to move and resting them when they need to rest. And so what happens is those invisible things of the spirit never get fully addressed. And those who struggle with them and are overwhelmed or frightened or just disconcerted will turn to what's in front of them, thinking that's the problem, the food or the fat. And the struggle never ever ends. And so I invite you to take this story into your being and let it settle in there for a while, and see if you can tune into what are those invisible things for you that might be the rest of the story when it comes to struggles with eating and food and weight. And so thank you for joining me today at Soul Stories, and I look forward to seeing you next time at the Light of the Moon Cafe. And I would really, really love to get your feedback. If you have any reaction to the stories, I'm quite curious to see what impact. So please scroll down and leave a message, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time at Soul Stories.